Today we are going to continue in the world of solving systems of equations using substitution. So on this first page, I call it level 1. This is just the review of what we did yesterday. And then we're going to take a look at the second and third page for level 2 and then special solutions. So I'm just going to do this first one here just to remind you what we did yesterday. So step 1, it said find a letter that's by itself. My lonely little letter in number 1 is the letter X. It's all by himself on one side of the equal sign, so I circled that X. I can put parentheses around what that X is. So now I go into the other equation, and instead of this X, I'm going to replace it with the expression that I know that X is. So the 6 gets to stay. Instead of X, I'm going to replace it with y minus 4 plus 5y equals negative 46. So I wrote the exact equation from the second one, except instead of the x, I plugged in the expression for what x was, which is just y minus 4. So to solve an equation, we get rid of parentheses first. 6 times y is 6y. 6 times 4 is minus 24. Then there's this plus 5y. There's an equal sign. And there's a negative 46. So now we need to combine like terms. 6y's plus 5y's is 11y minus 24 equals negative 46. Get y by itself. And then divide. So we just solved for y, and we got that y is negative 2. So in the y spot of the ordered pair, I am putting the number negative 2. So now that I know that y is negative 2, I need to solve for x. To solve for x, we can pick either equation, but it's easier to pick the equation that says x equals. So it says x is, instead of y, I know that the y is a negative 2. And then it says minus 4. So I wrote this exact equation, but instead of y, I replaced it with negative 2, because that's what I know that y is. Negative 2 minus 4 is negative 6. So the solution of these two lines, where they would cross, goes left 6 and down 2. Those are the x's and y's that would make the left side equal to the right. So my solution is negative 6, comma negative 2. So try the same thing with numbers 2 and 3. I'll set you up on number 2. Here's my letter that's by itself. Parentheses. Instead of this y, I'm going to replace it with the expression that I know that y is. So I rewrote that top equation, but instead of the y, I plugged in the expression that I knew that y is. So now go ahead and solve this, get rid of parentheses, combine like terms, and solve for x. Once you have solved for x, you can plug that value back into the second equation and get y equals a certain number. So number 2, and then try number 3, very easy. Okay, so when you're ready, let's take a look at number 4. So what it says in the first step of substitution is that we need a letter that's by itself. If we don't have a letter by itself, then substitution is not going to work. So if we look at the first example, this x is almost by itself, but there's another number that's with it on that side of the equal sign. So in order to start this, I need to move the 2y to the other side. So that leaves me with the expression x equals 2y minus 1. And then the second equation was fine. 6x minus 4y is negative 6. Now I have a letter by itself with an expression that I could plug in for the other equation. Okay, so in level 2 that we have here, we need a letter that's by itself. Once there's a letter by itself, I got x alone by adding 2y to the right. So then it's just x equals. I went to the other equation, and instead of x, I replaced it with what I know that x is. So now that I have an equation that's down to just one letter, we can solve for that one letter. I'll do it with you. Let's go. 6 times 2 is 12y. 6 times 1 is minus 6. Minus 4y is negative 6. 12y's minus 4y's is 8y. Minus 6 equals negative 6. Get y by itself. And divide. 0 is a number. It's a perfectly fine number. 0 divided by anything is just 0. So that means the y value, where these two cross, is 0. So now I take that and I plug it back into this x equals equation because I want to know what x equals. You could pick any equation and plug it back in, but it's easiest to plug it back into the one that says x equals. So it says x equals 2, y, which I now know is 0, minus 1. So I took this one to plug back in. So I took that y is 0 and I plugged it in to the x equals equation. 2 times 0 is 0, minus 1. 0 minus 1 is negative 1. So these two lines would cross at negative 1 comma 0. If we look at number 5, again, we need a letter by itself. It's easy. I can move this y, subtract y. That leaves me with x equals negative y minus 7. Now I have a letter by itself. I can rewrite the other equation. Now I can take this x value and plug it into the other equation for x. Okay, go ahead and try numbers 5 and number 6. Okay, last but not least, last page. Numbers 7, 8, and 9. So in number 7, it goes back to the beginning, level 1, very easy. We have a letter by itself. We put parentheses around what it is. I have a 2. Instead of x, I'm replacing it with what I know x is. Now I solve. So I get rid of parentheses by distributing. Negative 2 times 2 is negative 4y. 2 times 5 is 10. Bring down the 4y. Combine like terms. Negative 4y's plus 4y's. Oh no, that's 0. Those cancel. There are no y's left in this equation. That just leaves me with a 10, an equal sign, and an 8. No y's, no letters. So the solution is not an ordered pair. Does 10 ever equal 8? No. So this here is no solution. If you graphed them, they would have graphed like this. There is no ordered pair where they would have crossed. And I know that because the y's canceled when I went to solve them. -4 and a +4 is 0. There are 0 y's. So I looked at my remaining numbers. They're not the same. So I call that no solution. Let's take a look at one more. Same thing. This is a nice level 1 substitution. I have a letter by itself. I put parentheses around its expression. I find it in the other equation, and I cross it out. -6x plus 2. Instead of y is 3x plus 2. Then there's an equal sign, and there's a 4. Solve for x. Get rid of parentheses. That leaves you with -6x plus 6x plus 4 equals 4. Combine like terms. -6x plus 6x. -6 plus 6 is 0. There are no x's. The x is canceled. All you have left here is a 4, an equal sign, and a 4. This is true. 4 does equal 4. There's no letters. There's no x, y. If they're the same, it's called infinitely many solutions. Infinitely many solutions. What that means is if you were to graph the lines, you would graph one line, and then when you come back to graph the second line, it would be right on top of that first line there. If the letters canceled and you had numbers that were the same, it's called infinitely many solutions. Very easy.